Mary Harris was born in Ireland in 1837 amidst an environment that saw her paternal grandfather hanged for social agitation against the British. With this passion in her blood, Mary moved to Canada, where she reveled in schooling and eventually earned a teaching degree. Within a few years, Mary was married and well on her way to a domestic future, when a yellow fever epidemic took all four of her children and her husband. Devastated, Mary sought a new life as a dressmaker, only to have her world torn down again by the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Lost and hardened by these events, as well as her frustrations with the growing gap between the rich and the working class that seemed to characterize much of the Gilded Age, Mary's destiny changed dramatically, and so did her birth date. Mary applied her experiences and passion for the American worker to the expanding national labor union known as the Knights of Labor. Here she found solace, a lifelong friend in Terence Powderly, and an outlet for her compassionate and caring personality amongst the working men, women, and children of America. They would eventually call her Mother, and she took to the moniker wholeheartedly. Mother Jones was appalled by the exploitation brought on by the rapid expansion of American industry, and she set out to eliminate child labor, terrible pay, unsanitary working conditions, and excessive work hours. On May 1, 1886, striking workers at the McCormick Reaper Works clashed with police in Haymarket Square near Chicago. 11 people were killed, and a questionable investigation that imprisoned 8 strikers intensified the situation. Although the evidence was weak, 4 of the strikers were hanged, and 1 committed suicide before the governor could pardon the others for lack of due process.
In the cemetery of Waldheim, the dead were buried, but the struggle for an 8-hour day, for more human conditions and better relations between men lived on. We must pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living.
Following the Haymarket incident, Mary honored the dead when she changed her birth date to May 1, 1830. This actually made her 7 years older and thus accentuated her grandmotherly persona, which she regularly used to her advantage. She also began wearing predominantly black dresses to honor those who died for the cause of American labor, and in doing so, created an image that became synonymous with American organized labor. In 1902, Mary went to West Virginia, where miners' wages were the lowest in the country, and while speaking out against the mine owners, she was arrested. During the trial, the judge referred to her as the most dangerous person in America. She was released from jail and then spent some time in Pennsylvania during the Great Coal Strike of 1902. Appalachian miners so admired Mother Jones for her work on their behalf that the popular song "She'll Be Comin' Around the Mountain" evolved to engulf her savior-like persona. Mary had risen from the depths of tragedy and redefined her existence, as well as the notion that women were better seen than heard.
I have never had a vote, and I have raised hell all over this country. You don't need a vote to raise hell. You need convictions and a voice.
Child labor in the textile mills and the inability of Congress to pass an 8-hour workday bill motivated her to lead a children's crusade from Philadelphia to the steps of President Theodore Roosevelt's New York home.
These little children, raked by cruel toil beneath the iron wheels of greed, are starving in this country, which you have declared is in its height of prosperity.
During the march, Jones surrounded herself with young workers, many of whom had been injured on the job as they carried signs, sang songs, and raised awareness of the horrors of child labor. President Roosevelt never met with Mother Jones, but her passionate appeals resonated across the nation, and less than a year later, the National Child Labor Committee was formed and became the strongest advocate for child workers in the United States. Mary's iconic image had become inspirational for workers across the nation, so she went to Colorado to help the coal miners in Cripple Creek, then the copper miners in Michigan, Montana, and Arizona, the lead miners in Idaho, garment makers in New York City and Pennsylvania, iron ore workers in Minnesota, and railroad workers in the Pacific Northwest. In 1912, tensions resurfaced in West Virginia and Colorado. During one anxious altercation, the elderly Jones confronted a young soldier.
I put my hand over the muzzle of the gun and said, "Sir, my class goes into those mines. They bring out the metal that makes this gun. This is my gun. My class is not fighting you. They are fighting with bare fists and empty stomachs the men who rob them and deprive their children of childhood."
Mary was promptly arrested again, imprisoned again, and released again for lack of evidence. Her visit to Colorado had very similar results. While groups of women marched on Trinidad and Denver to demand Mother's release, strikers had been kicked out of their company homes in Trinidad and forced to live in a tent city near the small town of Ludlow. Their demands for better working conditions and higher pay were ignored, and scab workers were brought in to keep the mines running.
Rise up and strike. You are too cowardly to fight for your rights. There are enough women in this country to come and beat the hell out of you. If it is slavery or strike, I say strike till the last one of you drop in your graves.
Mary's words often inspired workers, worried company men, and agitated the status quo. However, in this case, they were prophetic. On April 20th, 1914, the workers' tent city in Ludlow was attacked, and 18 people were killed. The clash is still considered one of the greatest tragedies in the history of the American labor movement. Motivated by these tragic events, Mary was revitalized. She supported new strikes in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and even Mexico. She was arrested 3 more times, and she was even sued for libel and slander. In 1830, after a life of activism, Mother Jones passed away and was befittingly laid to rest at the site of the 1898 Verdun strike and massacre. The legacy of Mary Harris Jones is complex. She was a socialist, a labor leader, a feminist, an agitator, and of course a mother. At a time when progressivism demanded that governments mend the broken parts of America, Mary became a heroine to millions of men, women, and children who lacked a voice, and perhaps that is her greatest legacy.
You've got to talk a language people understand. The public is the sleepiest damn bunch you ever saw. You've got to wake them up. Then you get action.